This is the IQ test continued. I'm just going to tell you all the abilities that I've lost and stuff. I'm going to go into an in-depth score on this and explain to you like why my life sucks so bad. It's because of you. I mean, before my IQ was a lot higher. I mean, it wasn't higher, but it was like my brain worked. You don't need your full brain to take the IQ test. And I guess they're damaging all the parts, but what you need to take the IQ test, which isn't a very accurate measure anyway, because somebody's intelligence is really how much they can remember. I don't care what Einstein said or anything else. Their abilities, the reason why they're so smart is because they can remember facts so they can manipulate them. If you can't remember them, you can't manipulate them. I don't care what they say. No, I'm not Einstein. I'm just saying. My chief complaint was returning back to school, and my functioning, wanted to know if my functioning was intact enough to do it. And they said eventually that it's intact enough to go to school, but that I'll need help because my long-term memory is bad without Q memory. Which sorry, one sec. My vocabulary, my full scale IQ was a 116. My VCI was a 116. My PRI was a 115. My WMI was a 92. My block design was a 105. My matrix reasoning was a 115. And the reason why my block design was only a 105 was because I messed up one of them and I just gave up because I didn't want to waste her time. My arithmetic was a 90. My coding was 100. My picture completion was a 120. My digit span was 95. My information was 125. My comprehension was 110. My letter number sequencing was 90. My FAS was 103. My animals was 73. My naming was 84. My clock drawing was good approach with construction. Cube drawing, good approach and construction. Let's see here. And the breakdown of this gross function. Her score on the AMNART, a reading test used to estimate baseline verbal intelligence, was in the average range. Her full scale IQ indicate her gross functioning is in the high average range. My score on verbal comprehension indicates that she is in the high average range and in the 86th percentile when compared to her age group. Her score on the perceptual reasoning index was in the high average range as well. However, score on working memory was in the average range, placing her in the 30th percentile when compared with her age group. There was statistically significant difference at the 0.5 level between her working memory and her perceptual reasoning and verbal comprehension. And so my performance on attention varied. Her score on digit span, which is a test of simple attention working memory, was in the average range. Her score on letter number and sequencing, a test of attention, concentration and working memory, was in the average range as well. My score on complex trail making test, which is a test that taps attention and concentration, was in the average range on the first two trials. However, for the third trial, which presents more visual distractors items, her score was in the borderline range. It's because when I see something, I can't censor it out. So like if you have, right now, if there was music playing in the background, I wouldn't be able to differentiate between the music and talking. Like I wouldn't be able to talk and listen to the music at the same time. I remember one time I was at McDonald's and there was this little girl in front of me, and her feet were making noise, and I couldn't like focus on her on anything else but the noise that her feet were making. Language. My performance on tests of language varied and was average for phonetic fluency but defective for semantic fluency. My performance on the test of confrontational naming was in the low average range. I have no idea what that is. Visual spatial construction. Scores in the visual construction abilities were mixed. Her score on the block design was in the average range, again because I messed it up, whereas her score on the matrix reasoning was in the high average range. Her score on a copy of the trial of the Ray complex figure was in the average range, and that's because she didn't tell me that I was going to have to remember it. I would have remembered. I have a better visual memory than anything, so I would have remembered more of it if she would have told me, hey, you have to draw this, because I drew it in like 15 seconds. And then she was like, well, keep remembering this. And I was like, what? You didn't tell me that I needed to remember this? Like, that was very sneaky of her to do. So I probably would have gotten a higher score on that. Not that I'm trying to up my score. I mean, it would still... I've always scored between a 115 and a 120 on the IQ test ever since I was little. Well, there was one higher score when I was really little, but those aren't very accurate, those tests for that age group. My memory was mixed. My recall for a word list repeated over 5 trials was in the low average range, and my working for interference list was in the borderline range. Her recall for a list after a short delay was in the average range, but cued recall for the list was in the low average range. My memory for a list after a 30-minute delay was in the defective range for free recall and borderline range for cued recall. My recall for 2 short narratives was in the average range. My memory for the narrative after a 30-minute delay was in the low average range. And for the Ray complex was after a 30-minute delay was in the average range. Executive functioning were mixed. My scores on executive functioning performance were mixed. My scores on matrix reasoning and similarities, both tests of abstract conceptualization, were high average. My approach to drawing the clock and cube suggested good planning and strategy. My scores on 4 and 5 of the complex trail making test, which require processing speed and divided attention, were in the average range. It should be noted that trial 5 had to be administered twice in order to complete the test because I really couldn't do it. Her total number of errors on set shifting and inhibition was in the borderline range, while the amount of categories that she was able to complete was also in the borderline range. The number of responses that I produced me in this 27th percentile when compared to a normative group. Her score on the inhibition trial of the DKEFS color word, which is a test that measures response and inhibition and mental flexibility, was in the high average range, while her score on the inhibition switching trial was in the average range. It said that I had depression, but I don't have depression. It's just I'm a downer naturally, so I'm always kind of pissy even though I can't feel anything. So that was my IQ test in depth. I'm sorry if I was messed up. It's hard for me to focus on things, like I said, like talking and reading at the same time. Like, I get distracted so very easily because I can't censor things out. My mind will not censor things. And that's after Madonna's lobotomy.